What up, ladies and gents? This is George Bean, and today is my review for the 2011 film Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which was directed by Rupert Wyatt, written by Rick Jaffa, if I pronounced that correctly, and Amanda Silver, and starring James Franco as Dr. Will Rodman and the brilliant Andy Serkis as Caesar. Rise is the seventh installment in the Planet of the Apes series, and the reboot intended to launch a new series of films that would sort of set up and lead into the 1968 original Planet of the Apes, which starred Charlton Heston. The movie opened on August 5th, 2011, and it went on to end its box office run with a total gross of over $481 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing Planet of the Apes film at the time, until its sequel, Dawn, outperformed it 3 years later. With that, it also achieved mass critical acclaim. Even Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars. Many of the acclaim went specifically to Serkis's performance as Caesar. It ended up earning him many nominations from associations which did not usually recognize performance capture as traditional acting, so much so that for years there have been talks and rumors of Caesar possibly gaining an Oscar, something many people have contended for. I included. I thought it would have been cool to have him even get nominated for an Oscar for that performance. I think he's really good in it. The plot? The film follows a genetic scientist, Dr. Will Rodman, played by James Franco, who is working to develop what is to be a cure for Alzheimer's, using apes as test subjects. But as his work progresses, Will realizes that one certain chimpanzee, whom he names as Caesar, played brilliantly by Andy Serkis, is developing increased intelligence in the past few years. However, things suddenly begin to turn out for the worse, as Caesar is put into the primate shelter along with several other apes, and thus Caesar learns how it feels to be treated like a normal animal. As a result, Caesar eventually decides to form a plan to give his fellow sheltered apes the Alzheimer's cure, lead them to escape the shelter, and eventually lead an ape revolt or exodus against the human authorities in a big battle on the Golden Gate Bridge. The idea for this movie first came to life back in 2005, when writers Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver were inspired by news articles on apes being raised as humans and advanced in genetics, which gave them the idea for a film about a genetically enhanced chimp being raised in a human household. And that was when they found similarities between it and Planet of the Apes. When they began writing the script, they watched an Apes marathon of all the previous Ape movies to reacquaint themselves into the mythology, and so they used a history lesson told by Cornelius and Zira in the third installment, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, where they discuss how the very first ape, Aldo, gained speech and said no, and how he led an ape uprising, which would birth what would eventually become the Planet of the Apes we see in the 1968 original. Jaffa and Silver pitched their concept to Fox as a way to reboot the Apes franchise by reinventing the story of the chimpanzee Caesar, the lead character of the fourth original installment, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Now, Fox did purchase the script, but it would take them 5 years to get it off the ground, being cycled through many script drafts, writers, directors, and producers. That is until 2010, when producers Peter Chernin and Dylan Clark stepped in to move the film forward and retain Jaffa and Silver as writers, and eventually Rupert Wyatt as director. To say this first, I am a fan of Planet of the Apes. I had seen the 1968 original when I was a little kid, but it wasn't until I was like 15 or 16 when I got to watch it again, and I fell in love with it. And I had also gotten to read the original book by Pierre Boulle, and understanding how different it was from the movie. and I had finally gotten around to watching the original 5 sequels on an AMC marathon on TV with my pops when I was in, like, 20. So yeah, I was accustomed to the Planet of the Apes films, and became a sort of fan to them. I remember back in 2009 or 10, when I was like 16 or 17, when I first heard of this movie being developed, when it was first titled Rise of the Apes, and that it was at first described as a prequel, and that it would star James Franco as a scientist who takes care of a genetically intelligent ape. My very first thought was, really? I initially thought it sounded awful. I was just thinking to myself, this is not gonna work. This is not gonna work. It sounded like a doomed film. But after finally seeing the first trailer for it, my opinion started to change to that of positivity. I thought, huh, this actually looks pretty interesting. I'll go check it out. Then I see the movie upon its August 2011 release, and I was just blown away by what I had seen, after which I had started to have hopes for whatever new story arc this movie was going to go for. Looking back now and seeing this as a full-on trilogy, I never thought I'd ever be able to be I never thought I'd ever be glad to be wrong for once. I really gotta say, goddamn was this movie very surprising. I did not expect it to turn out as great as it did. In fact, it was considered the surprise hit of 2011 by many people. It breathed new life into a dead franchise, especially after the 2001 remake by Tim Burton did not turn out as successful as 20th Century Fox had hoped it would. I even loved the tagline they had for the film. Evolution becomes revolution. That's an awesome tagline right there. Most of the human cast was decent in this. James Franco was really good as the human protagonist. He's very different from the stoner friend we usually know him by. John Lithgow was stellar as Will's father, who's suffering from Alzheimer's. Tom Felton, aka Draco Malfoy, is in this, believe it or not. And Brian Cox has a decent performance as well. But as the film progresses, you realize that the real star of this movie is Andy Serkis as Caesar, who uses total silence and his facial expressions to convey how he feels deep down inside. He's like the best thing in the whole entire movie, and the trilogy. To start things off, the motion capture used for the apes are incredible, thanks to the incredible work of Weta Digital. Yes, there are some moments where the CGI does look a bit artificial the more you watch it, but with the use of low lighting, it does make it seem like the apes are actually there. Andy Serkis is a pioneer in mocap performance, thanks to having used a similar technology for other films such as the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where he played Gollum, and the 2005 King Kong remake, of which he played the title role. Mocap performance is pioneering in Hollywood filmmaking, as it can be used to create CGI characters while having actual actors there to give the CG characters some emotion. Another thing to bring up is that Serkis isn't the only person who performs as an ape in this film. We also have an orangutan named Maurice, played by Karen Konoval, whom I remember as that alcoholic, abusive mother of the killer in the 2000 remake of Black Christmas. I didn't even know that was her. I was shocked when I found out. We also have Rocket, played by Terry Notary. He started off his career as a performer in Cirque du Soleil before he moved on to the movie business. He became Tim Roth's stunt double on not only the 2001 Apes remake, but also the 2008 Marvel film The Incredible Hulk. He also portrayed King Kong in this year's Kong Skull Island alongside Toby Kebbell, who would go on to play Koba in Dawn. And apparently, Notary will be doing the mocap for Groot in next year's Avengers Infinity War. Pretty cool, huh? One thing I need to mention is the battle on the Golden Gate Bridge in the climax. When Caesar leads his fellow apes to escape from their prisons on an exodus through the city, through the bridge to reach the Mirror-Red Woods. But first, they'd have to go through a legion of authorities, specifically police officers, SWAT team, and even a police helicopter. My most favorite moment out of that battle was when Will's greedy boss, Stephen Jacobs, arrives in the police helicopter and starts shooting at the apes. Caesar throws a chain at them and almost gets shot back, but Buck the gorilla steps in, takes the bullets, but with a rush of adrenaline, he boosts himself up to the helicopter and lands in it, and manages to take it down, crashing it onto the bridge. At that moment, when I first saw that scene in cinema, I just slowly was like, that was just fucking awesome. It was brilliant. But it was whoa. One other scene I love is when Brian Cox's character is about to leave the primate shelter, but when passing by the primate rec room, he notices that all of the apes have gathered around Caesar like their leader, and then Caesar slowly turns his head towards Cox, giving him a cold stare like, "What are you looking at?" Before Cox moves on and walks away, albeit a little alarmed. That was like a great scene, how the apes, having been dosed with the ALZ-113 virus by Caesar, have gathered around him, and it shows his transition from the new kid on the block to a newfound leader. If that was me seeing that, I think red flags would be going off in my head at that point. But still, such a great scene to watch. Now, to mention, there are several Easter egg references in this movie that make reference to the original film. Caesar's mother's named Bright Eyes, much like Charlton Heston's character Taylor was called in the original. Tom Felton's character is named Dodge Landon, in reference to Taylor's two fellow astronauts, Dodge and Landon. Caesar is at one point assembling a Lego Statue of Liberty. Spoiler alert, makers of this movie? The orangutan Maurice, the name is in reference to actor Maurice Evans, the actor who played Dr. Zaius in the original. And finally, we also have two famous lines from the original, those being, "It's a madhouse," and "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape," both uttered by Tom Felton. But one great moment that comes after he says the latter line to Caesar, Caesar then finally speaks his very first word, "No." That was like the best shock moment in the whole movie. I was like wide-eyed when that first happened. And last but not least, there are two subtle references to a NASA shuttle, dubbed the Icarus, having entered Mars' atmosphere, but then suddenly disappears without a trace. As diehard fans, we all know that Taylor is on that ship, and so it is very likely that ship will return in the next 2,000 years, and crash lands back to Earth, with no clue of what has become of Earth during their absence. Oh, and then one other thing I should mention. The Planet of the Apes franchise has been known for having memorable lines in it. Of course, "It's a madhouse," and take your stinking paw off me, you damn dirty ape," and even "Ape shall not kill ape." In this film came two new elements, one being the symbol that you can see behind me, which was modeled after the window for the attic Caesar had lived in during his childhood, and has become his own symbol. Another great quote created was when he was conversing with Maurice through sign language about his strategy, in which he breaks a branch, arguing apes alone weak, before he breaks the branches and puts them together, showing how unbreakable they are, arguing apes together strong. This has become a new memorable quote for the new ape films to come, most prominently in War. Now, for the references, it apparently left many people confused as to what exactly the movie is supposed to be. Is it a prequel? Is it a remake of Conquest? What is it? The filmmakers have went out of their way to say that it is in effect a reboot that uses the original Planet of the Apes films as an inspirational template. In many ways, you can consider it as an improved remake of Conquest, but you must also watch it as a completely standalone film. Just look at Batman Begins. Before that film was released, many initially thought it was going to be a prequel, but it was a full-on reboot. And that film is what made the term reboot extremely popular and mainstream. It proved you can start fresh on a franchise with no connection to the previous series. And since then, Hollywood has been getting their hands on whatever property they could find and give them the reboot treatment, such as examples following not far behind being the 2006 James Bond film Casino Royale, the 2013 Superman film Man of Steel. Even Spider-Man has been given the reboot treatment twice. The latest one being this year with Spider-Man Homecoming. What I like is that this film continues the franchise sub-themes that have become popular since the first film, the primary one being its treatment of race and the prejudice that comes with it. There was this author who wrote a book on the role of race in the original films and spin-off material named Eric Green, who wrote that, quote, "When seen as one epic work, the Apes saga emerges as a liberal allegory of racial conflict. According to him, the arc's central message is that unresolved racial discord inevitably leads to cataclysm. Whilst the original films and series used the Cold War and the threat of nuclear holocaust to advance its themes, this film uses the theme of animal rights, domesticization, and how we use primates as test subjects for scientific experiments. In this reboot series, the primate rights theme is much more dominant, which directly invoked the question of great ape personhood and betraying Caesar and his friends struggling for their rights in a society that does not consider them legal persons. And unlike the original film, which revealed that the Earth was subjected to nuclear war, this film uses a lethal man-made virus as the cataclysm that would eventually lead to the apes conquering the Earth. But what's ironic is that the original, when Dr. Sayers asks Taylor what may have caused humanity's doom, the Taylor answers possibilities such as a plague, or a storm of meteors, etc. See how he mentions plague? So it kind of fits here in this reboot. So, to end this review, overall, I would have to give Rise of the Planet of the Apes at least 7.5 stars out of 10, because I think it is an impressive reboot to a dying franchise. Andy Serkis is phenomenal as Caesar. The mocap performance is brilliant, and it is an interesting first chapter to an intriguing story arc focusing on Caesar's rise from a domesticized ape to a revolutionary to a messianic leader of what is eventually to become a planet of apes. Definitely much better made films than the Tim Burton remake. And I gotta say, I cannot wait to get around to reviewing both Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War for the Planet of the Apes. I'm definitely going to review these movies. I got so much to say about them. So thanks for watching, ladies and gents. And until then, I'll see you all next time. And remember, Apes Together Strong. See you guys. Peace.